Chapter 8 of The Man with the Red Beard by David Whitelaw. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne. Chapter 8 The Traitor. The shooting appeared to have ceased, but the city was in anything but its normal state. Here and there a shop would be seen half open, the shutters piled in readiness for instant use in reclosing the premises at the first sign of alarm. There were a fair number of people in the streets, but they apparently had no occupation, and again I told myself that Moscow was a city waiting for something, for some inevitable and terrible happening. There were a few sleighs, but these were mainly occupied by soldiers or uniformed officials of the Tsar. It was not far to my friend's house, and I did not waste time looking for a conveyance, but walked briskly to my destination. Dick Berryman was at his breakfast. He received me rapturously, but when I mentioned the report for the Mercury, he looked grave. "It's harder than you think, Sammy," he said, "but I'll see what I can do. I hear that the soldiers are hoping to rush a delivery through to Petersburg. I've got a few letters going, and I'll put yours in it if you like to risk it." It was my only chance, and I thanked him as he left me, taking my envelope with him to make the necessary arrangements. There was a little heap of English papers on the table, and I took up a Telegraph, hoping that I should find something of the London end of my adventure. There was a short account only, and to all appearances the authorities had not yet got to the truth of the Peter Bergstoff affair. They still accepted the explanation, a very natural one, that the bullet had been intended for the police, and that an attempt at rescue provided the motive. I am afraid that the devil in my heart stirred as I read that the wounded man was recovering, was indeed so far convalescent as to be considered able to appear at Bow Street on the following Saturday. But I was interrupted in my thoughts by the return of Berryman. He was dressed for the street, and his handsome, boyish face showed well beneath his jaunty astrachan hat. He was going out, he said, to see what was up. We made our way to a square adjoining the Kremlin, and here the night's work had left many a mark. Some of the facades of the houses showed where the bullets had struck round the window sashes. The body of a man lay stretched out, a dark blot on the snow at the mouth of the alleyway. My companion and I hurried past, and he led the way to a café he knew, and where, he said, it was possible to get real Scotch whisky. From the windows of this place we could look out upon the happenings in the square. And when we were seated at our table, I asked Dick a question which had been in my mind since waking. He put down his glass when I had asked it, and stared at me, I thought, a little blankly. "And what may be your business with Myra Ramsay?" I lit a cigarette whilst I debated with myself how much I should tell, and my eyes were on the glowing end as I answered as carelessly as I could. "It isn't I, Dick. I undertook a message for her from a friend of mine in London. I met her yesterday." "Where?" I looked up at the sharpness of the question. "I don't think I'll tell you where. That is, if you don't mind. Least said, you know." Berryman laid a hand on my arm. "If you've seen her, perhaps you've delivered the message. There is no necessity to see her again, eh?" "Why not?" "Because, Sammy, I don't want to see an old chum get into trouble. If Miss Ramsay likes to meddle in the affairs of the Tsar, there's no reason why you should make an ass of yourself as well." And when I did not answer, "The young lady was arrested last week, and only liberated by the greatest of luck. She won't be free for long. Miss Myra is a dangerous person, and, Sammy, my boy, a devilish pretty woman as well. The combination is fatal." "You mean that she is suspected? Watched?" "I mean that the next time the police have their hands on her pretty shoulders, it'll be Irkutsk or worse." Dick leaned across the table and whispered, "It's an old dodge, this liberating. It always gains fresh evidence. She's English, I know, and you're English, but you can take it from me, I can't help you if you get into a mess." A commotion outside the square drew our attention at that moment, and on our resuming our seats I did not revive the subject of Myra Ramsay. I wanted to think over what I had heard. I felt a vague exultation that danger threatened the girl, and that my journey bade fair to be no fool's errand after all. I scented service, and I saw a vision of thankful grey eyes. When Berryman left me, I sat a little longer in the warm café, then returned to my hotel. I was to meet Bergstoff there, and together we were to attend a social held at the house of one high in revolutionary circles. Perhaps, I thought, I would meet Myra there. I decided, if possible, to take a little of the rest that had been denied me in the night, and, banking up my stove, I lay on the bed and slept, till at 5 o'clock I was awakened by Bernard. "It's a sort of housewarming," my friend told me, as, early in the evening, we made our way to the house, situated in a street leading out of the Red Square. "Marazef has been away for a week or two on some mission connected with the Brotherhood. He is in the highest circle, you know. It's going to be quite an informal affair tonight, I imagine." I did not answer at once, for the name Marazef had set my thoughts racing. I could only think that this was my friend of the red beard. He, I knew, had been on a mission, the consummation of which I had witnessed in the fog at Leicester Square. "Will Miss Ramsay be there?" I asked at last. "I think not. I don't know why exactly I think that, but I was with Marazef this morning, and I gathered somehow that she would not." There had been no further fall of snow during the day, but it was very cold, and our feet bit crisply into the white mantle on the pavements. We passed many places where there was evidence of fighting, and through the half-open door of a stable-yard I saw 2 or 3 figures stretched out upon the ground and covered roughly over with coats. 2 sledges passed us, in which uniformed men were supporting the forms of wounded people. Bernard and I separated a block away from our destination, he to make his way by a devious route known only to a few, I to walk boldly past the doorkeeper of the flat house and up to the 3rd floor. The meeting was not a political one, but the gathering together of so many friends of the Revolution was in itself illegal, and it were well to take all precautions. Bernard had already arrived when I entered the reception-room, and he it was who introduced me to my host. Felix Marazef greeted me, speaking in English. There was no sign in the white, inscrutable face to show that he had ever set eyes on me before. Indeed, I think, of the 2, I was the more perturbed, and it was all I could do to repress a shudder at the cold clasp of his long, thin fingers. He walked with me over to a table between the 2 big windows and insisted that I should take tea. There were but a few people as yet in the room, although the array of cups round the steaming samovar spoke of many more to come. I need hardly say, my host was speaking in a cold but purring voice, which went well with his looks and manner, that any friend of Berkstoff's is welcome here. You English are the friends of liberty the world over. Some say that we Russians hate your nation. Believe me, it is not so with all of us. I love the English. You have, perhaps, visited English, monsieur? Marazef shook his head, and it was, no doubt, only my fancy which made me think that his eyes rested inquiringly upon mine. "No, monsieur, I have never been in England. Perhaps some day." He broke off and made his excuses as he left me to greet a batch of new arrivals. I walked to one of the windows and looked down into the street. I was quite sure, now, that the man had not recognized me. Had he done so he would not have troubled to tell me such a lie as that he had never been in England. I was glad of it, for if ever we came to grips my way would be the easier for it. I do not think that I attached any particular significance at the time to what I saw below me in the streets, but in the light of later events I remembered the activity of the soldiers. There was a yard a little to my left which seemed filled with troops. There are many of these places in Moscow, stabling and gardens adjoining houses, which but for their surroundings might well have been in the country, and it was quite a usual thing for these spaces to be utilized as bases for the soldiery. I had seen many so occupied since my arrival, and, as I have said, the one I watched from Felix Marazef's window had to me no particular significance. The room was now rapidly filling, and I was introduced to many of the guests by Berkstoff. They were, for the most part, men, and in the eyes of all of them burnt the fires of resolved fanaticism for their cause. They interested me, these men and women with the earnest faces, but at each new arrival I glanced up, hoping to see the one face which had become all the world to me. After what Berkstoff had said, I hardly expected that Myra Ramsay would be there, and I felt a thrill of pleasurable surprise when I saw her standing in the doorway. She was dressed warmly in a fur-lined coat reaching to her heels, and on her glorious hair a little sable toque was set jauntily. My eyes followed her as she crossed the room to greet her host, and I saw a strange thing. Marazef had been talking to a small group of young men, and as he looked up and caught sight of Myra a terrible change passed over him. I had not thought it possible that his face could become whiter than it usually was, but as I looked it seemed to me that it did so. Perhaps it was fancy helped by the expression of the eyes. Into these there came a look that I can best describe as hopeless horror. In a flash I remembered that Paul had hinted that Felix Merazov's mission in removing him had not alone been actuated by political motives, that the man I had met so strangely in the Empire was also an obstacle to Merazov in matters of the heart. The floodgates of my reason seemed suddenly to open, and I saw things in a clear light. What had Merazov been doing in friendly conversation with General Alitska in Paris? Why was it that he had known, or at least given Bernard the impression that Myra was not to be at the gathering that night? The questions crowded upon me. I looked round the room. Surely there were present here the pick of the revolutionary leaders in Moscow. What a bag for the authorities! The crowds mobilizing in the streets below took on a new sinister significance. Call it intuition or what you will, but I told myself that I was looking upon a roomful of doomed men and women. I glanced covertly towards the object of my suspicions, and as I did so, those suspicions were more than confirmed. Merazov had taken Myra to a curtained alcove, and was speaking to her earnestly. He was, judging from his actions, in turn imploring and commanding. And ever as he spoke he glanced surreptitiously at a clock which hung over the great white porcelain stove at the end of the room. Cautiously I made my way to the curtain that hung near them. There was too much noise in the room for me to hear all that was passing in the alcove, but I gathered that Merazov was imploring Myra to do something, and that the girl was surprised at the request. "At 7 o'clock. Now. You have just time." "But Olga said she would be here. I cannot understand." "No, no, not here. At rooms. Miss Ramsay, you must go. At once." I made up my mind quickly, and entering the alcove I touched the man on the shoulder. "I am delighted to have met you," I said, as I took his thin cold fingers in my grasp and bowed to Myra, "and I regret that my visit should be such a short one. I have an appointment. We newspaper men can never—" He broke in on me eagerly. "So, then you can perhaps see Miss Ramsay here safely to her friend's house. I have a message from Olga." The girl spoke with a little laugh. "But I can't understand it. Olga said she would meet me here." Felix Merazov did not appear to be listening. He turned his head, his eyes fixed upon the face of the clock. I saw that the nails were biting into the flesh of his palms. "If Miss Ramsay will accept my escort," I said, and sent the girl a message with my eyes, the import of which she evidently understood, for she came towards me, fastening the fur neck of her coat. "Very well, but I am disappointed, Monsieur Merazov. There are so many of my friends here tonight. I was looking forward to—" We heard it, both of us at the same time, and Felix Merazov, too, must have heard the movement on the stairs, for he turned to the room with a gesture of utter hopelessness and left us to ourselves. Reading what was in the man's mind, I almost pitied him in his despair, and almost thanked him for his efforts to save the girl from the results of his treachery. There sounded a blow on the door, and peering through the curtains, I saw that a tall officer had entered the room, and that behind him were policemen. I pushed Myra back into the alcove, and we stood there breathless. "Quick! There's a door here. For God's sake, don't question me." It was Merazov who had returned to us, and he spoke in little husky jerks as he fumbled unhandily at the fastenings of a little door in the wall at the back of the alcove. He looked at me once, and I knew that he read in my eyes that I knew him for the traitor he was, but it was not the time for vengeance. That, I said, could wait. He pushed us roughly through the aperture, and I heard that door shut so softly behind us, leaving us in the darkness of the pit. I struck a match and saw that we stood at the head of a narrow flight of stairs. I felt upon my arm the slight pressure of Myra's hand, and a little moaning voice was saying, "What does it mean? What does it mean?" "It means," I said, "that your friends are doomed. We alone may escape, with God's help. We and," I added to myself, as I thought of the Judas on the other side of the door, "one other, with the help of the devil." End of chapter 8.